Hello everyone, this is Shannon Flummerfeld here for the FlippedSchools. This is the Understanding Improvement series. This video is for Bldg administrators. It's designed to help you to understand on a very basic level how to examine some of your core instructional processes in order to help you to drive improvement. Certainly if you're using a FlippedSchools approach, there are going to be lots and lots of opportunities for you to change the educational culture of your building. And this short video is designed to help you to understand how to possibly begin to do that with looking at some of your instructional processes. First of all, let's decide what are processes. I'm using a definition from the Business Dictionary where processes are defined as a sequence or a series of steps that are related to each other. There are procedures that you go through, there are protocols that you go through, which do take up resources, and you need to think about this, of course, in your buildings with the allocation of scarce resources that you're dealing with. We need to think very carefully about what kinds of resources are being used to make processes enacted. And so we begin to think about processes as a sequence of inputs with the process occurring in the middle and then the output to the process occurring at the end. And certainly as you go through and take a look at how you're using resources in order to create the inputs, engage in the process, and then work with the output, the idea is that those resources are being allocated in the best possible way in order for you to obtain the instructional goals that you're trying to hit in your building. So there are many, many instructional processes in your building. One of the things that we're going to look at today in this short video is the traditional teacher evaluation process and a new process that's emerging in school practice called instructional rounds. Now I'm going to provide these two examples of processes so that you can lay these out and begin to understand, what do I have to do to create the inputs? What does the process actually require? And of what value are the outputs? And so when you begin to examine how you're allocating resources for this work to happen, it begins to help you to understand where possibly you might create points of improvement. So we're going to start first of all with a very simplistic examination of the traditional teacher evaluation process. This next slide lays out for you what this looks like. The green box represents inputs, the blue box represents processes, the rose-colored box represents the output. And all of this happens, of course, over a period of time with inputs leading to process, with process leading to output. So this is a very simplistic visual diagram of the traditional teacher evaluation process. Let's take a look at what this engages in your building. First of all, in terms of input, you start to think about what has to happen in order for teacher evaluation to actually occur. Well, here are some of the things that happen. First of all, you as a building administrator would inform a teacher, this is your year for evaluation. And you would probably ask the teacher for some professional goals that teacher might have, and you'd receive those and review those. The actual teacher evaluation process involves you as a building administrator going into a classroom and observing it for a period of time. You might have more than one observation. In fact, most state laws require that there are a series of 3 or 4 observations in a given evaluation process period. You observe the classroom. Typically what might happen is you might create a script for the observation. Based on that script, then, you would complete a performance evaluation. Perhaps there's a rubric in your district or in your building that you use for all teacher evaluations. In some cases, states require standardized rubrics as well. And then you would go ahead and sit down with the teacher and go ahead and debrief on the evaluation. There'd be some conversation in the debriefing, and in the end, basically, what you're looking for is the teacher to agree or disagree to sign off on the evaluation. And in some cases, the teacher, if they're highly effective and highly reflective, they'll take the debriefing, and they'll try to go ahead and do something to improve their performance. But typically with a traditional teacher evaluation process, this is sort of the end output, is that you're getting to an agreement that you've both gone through this process through the year and there's a sign-off. So of course this is a very straightforward, very pragmatic approach to traditional teacher evaluation. Now, in contrast, I'm going to show you a different process example, and this is something that's called instructional rounds. And instructional rounds are coming out of some projects out of Harvard University. There's some very interesting work that's being done in terms of looking at instructional rounds as a part of the instructional protocol that happens in a building. And it's a very different kind of a process, as you'll see here by this simple process diagram. What happens is that the inputs are very different from the beginning. And that is that the school begins by collaboratively looking at its data sets, looking at its subgroups, looking at, there might even be some qualitative data, there may be some survey data, there may be standardized test scores or other kinds of achievement data. Whatever the focus happens to be, the school begins to look at that data, examine it, analyze it, and understanding it, with the idea that what the school is trying to do is identify where there may be some weaknesses collectively in teacher practice. And once that's identified, then the school will go ahead and request an observation team to come in and to visit the classrooms, however many teachers are involved in this particular instructional rounds process. Then what happens next is that the actual instructional rounds process begins. An observation team will visit the classroom. There are some schools who are experimenting with the differences between having external observation teams versus internal observation teams, do the visiting, and so on. But some kind of an observation team would come in, look at what's happening in a classroom period through the lens of, what the teaching practice weakness is. And what they'll try to do is actually identify for the school what the problem of practice happens to be. And then based on that, work with the school to select a theory of action in order to solve the problem of practice. So for instance, if we find that, we have high levels of student disengagement, or maybe there's some gender or equity discrimination going on in our classrooms, or perhaps there are particular classrooms which need to use more project-based learning, or help students to understand and use critical thinking. Whatever the weakness is, the problem of practice is, then a theory of action would be selected. And then the school, as the output, actually uses that theory of action and makes the instructional improvement happen. Again, just to stay parallel with the other example, this would happen over the course of a school year. So as you lay this particular instructional rounds process out, and you consider this against teacher evaluation or any other kind of school improvement process that might be going on in your building, for instance, you begin to think about what kinds of resources do I need in order to create the inputs, have the actual process happen, and then to be able to work with the output. As you make these decisions and you do these comparisons and contrasts, you can begin to analyze the most effective way to go ahead and drive some improvement in your building. This, used in conjunction with the actual technology of the flipped classroom, can really help you to create an improvement culture in your school. I hope you've enjoyed the video.